Hello everyone. Today I am doing some more trigonometry. This time we are going to be solving triangles. But before we do that, I am doing a warm-up. That's right, I'm actually doing a warm-up. That basically says if you can't do this, then you should not watch this video. Instead, you should watch the other video and get some practice with being able to identify the three sides of the triangle: the opposite, the adjacent, and the hypotenuse. Because if you cannot identify those three sides of every one of these triangles, then you're just not ready for this. I'm sorry. You need to get some more practice with it. So either that would mean go back and watch the other video, or watch this warm-up multiple times until it starts to make sense to you and you could tell me the answers again. You know, just like keep rewinding it and then trying it yourself, and then check the answers against me until you're getting them all right, 4 for 4. Because you need to know this before you can do what we're doing today in the rest of the video. So if you have not done so already, please go ahead and pause the video and just try them. You can either try all 4 of them, or you can do them one at a time, pausing in between. Go ahead and do that. All right. So hopefully what you have gotten is that in this right triangle, H, the hypotenuse, was this side. The opposite side, opposite of this angle, would be here, and this would be the adjacent. For the next one, this time the hypotenuse was down there, across from the right angle. If this is the angle we're looking at, then opposite it would be over here, meaning the only thing left is adjacent over there. Hopefully you're 2 for 2. And this triangle over here, the hypotenuse would be that one right there. If this is the hypotenuse, then that means the one next to it has to be adjacent, meaning this is opposite. And then this would be hypotenuse, and this would be adjacent, and this would be opposite. So once again, you need to be 4 for 4 to that. If you did not get every single one of these right, then just rewind the video and do it again until you can get them for 4 for 4. Okay, that said, let's get on to the real stuff. What we're going to be doing, I'm actually combining 2 worksheets into one. We're going to be solving triangles. This says how to find the value for a missing side. I'm actually doing sides and angles today because they're the same. When you solve trig equations, you will either be looking for a side or an angle, and there's only one of 3 things that you'll ever have to do. Like, forget about this piece of paper, also finding missing angles. It's just how you're solving for the third thing that's going to change, but your equations are going to be set up the exact same way. So I'm going to be combining it into one video, and here we go. First we're going to do is circle the reference angle, or I just kind of mark it myself, and identify the 3 sides: opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse, which is why we had that warm up. So here we go. This is the hypotenuse. This is the opposite, and that means this is the adjacent. But there's nothing there. Yeah, it turns out every single time without fail, when you do triangles, you're going to notice that 2 of the sides are labeled but not the third. In this one, 2 sides were labeled but not the third. Down here, 2 sides are labeled but not the third. 2 sides are labeled but not the third. The way trigonometry works is that one of the sides will be completely blank, right? You don't know what x is, but it's still labeled as an x. That's going to happen on every single one of these things. The reason for that is because if I was to write sine of theta equals opposite over hypotenuse, which is one of the 3 ratios, it's important to note that there are 3 variables, or 3 things that will be numbers here. The theta is an angle. So maybe you will have the angle and maybe you will not. This O is the opposite side. Maybe you'll have the opposite side and maybe you won't. I'm not sure. Unfortunately, I lost my pink highlighter, so I'm just gonna have to go ahead and do this. The hypotenuse. It is a variable. You're either gonna have it as a number or it's going to just stay a variable. But these are three different things that you'll be plugging in. If you have an angle, you would put it there, right? Theta is an angle. So if you know the angle, you're going to be putting a number there. If you don't know the angle, then you don't put a number there. O and H are both sides. So if you know the opposite, you plug it in. If it just says X, then you write an X. But there are three things right here. Okay? So going back over to this, I tend to circle them if it's labeled, so I know exactly what I'm doing. So I did not circle the A because there is nothing to circle it with. That's what I did. X was opposite, 19 is hypotenuse. So what you need to do is you need to decide which of the three to use based on SOHCAHTOA. Right? It says it up here, but I'm going to be writing it down for every single problem because it's super important to memorize. So you should as well. And what you're going to do is you're going to ask yourself, which of these three will you use based on what I circled or what is labeled? Opposite and hypotenuse. So scan, pause it if you need to, but scan, would I use sine, cosine, or tangent if I have opposite over hypotenuse? And the answer is sine, opposite and hypotenuse. So I will write out what I wrote up here on top. The equation I will use is sine of theta equals opposite over hypotenuse. These are three things, and in every problem we do for this entire video, we will be given two of these three things, and we will solve for the third. So maybe we'll know the angle and opposite, and we'll solve hypotenuse. Maybe we'll know the angle and hypotenuse and solve for the opposite. Or maybe we'll know the opposite and hypotenuse, but not know the angle. But in every single case, you will know two of these three things, and then you solve for the third. It's just how you solve for the third that's going to change in every problem. So here we go. Sine of theta. So the question is, do we know the angle? And the answer is yes. It's 28. Do we know the opposite? It's x. And then hypotenuse was 19, like that. So sine of 28 equals x over 19. That is set up. Once again, we have two numbers, but not the third. So we're going to be solving for x. The way you solve for x here is, since you are dividing by 19, you would multiply both sides by 19. That way it would cross those out. And then 19 times sine of 28 would be equal to x. We just have to figure out what that is. Now, depending on what calculator you're using, like I'm having a TI-80 something, mine's an 84, some people use 83, sometimes 89, whatever. But if you are using a TI calculator, then make sure you have set the correct mode. If you press mode, it changes all these things, and you'll see right here there's something called radians, but we want it to be in degree mode. So I'm going to have to go down and over and press enter, so it's in degree mode. If you're using Desmos or an online calculator, it's probably already in degree mode. You'd have to double check, but it does need to be in degree mode. So if you're getting really weird answers, that's probably why. Just check to see if it's not accidentally on radians. And I'll just type this in, 19 sine 28, and I press the enter button, and that's the answer. 8.9, I'm just gonna round it to 8.9. So x is approximately 8.9. And that's it, that's the answer. All right. Let's try another one. Here's the angle, 72. I will once again look for the opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse. So here's the hypotenuse across from the right angle. If this is 72, then this would be the adjacent side. And this would be the opposite side. Adjacent and opposite. So once again, so what? I have to think about which of these three would I use. Hypotenuse is not labeled. It's just opposite and adjacent. So opposite and adjacent is which one? Pause if you need to. Opposite and adjacent. Tangent. So I would do tangent of theta equals opposite over adjacent. Once again, there are 3 letters here. One of them's a Greek letter, but it's still 3 letters. We will know 2 of them, and we will solve for the third. So do we know the angle? Yes, it's 72. Do we know the opposite? It's labeled as 25, right? So it's going to be 25. And the adjacent was labeled as x, so 25 over x. Now, unfortunately, in this one, you are not going to just multiply both sides by 25 in order to solve for x. It doesn't work that way, because like if you tried to multiply by 25, well, then you would have 25 times 25, which is a really, really big number. It's like 625 or something like that. So you can't multiply by 25 to get rid of this 25. The long story of what you would have to do is multiply both sides by x to cross that out. And then you would have to divide both sides by tangent in order to get rid of that, to get x equals. But the shorter thing that people do, and by people I mean me, is a little trick where if you note that x is on bottom, when x is on the bottom, you can actually just switch these 2 values. The x will now be on the left, and the tangent will now be on the bottom. Like so. Or as it is sometimes said, when x is up high, you multiply. But when x is down low, well, you switch, you know? Ha ha ha, get it? Because it rhymes. When x is up high, you multiply. But when x is down low, then you switch, you know? So you just switch them. It'll be 25 divided by the tangent of 72. And that is, once again, a job for the calculator. 25 divided by the tangent of 72. And that's going to be 8.1 about. I'll round to 3 decimals this time, because you have to get used to rounding to different places. So to the thousandths would be 1229. The 9 would make that a 3. So 123, 8.123. Like so. Okay. So I recommend trying. I'm only going to go over maybe 2 of these, but pause and try it. And then I'm going to go over it in 3, 2, 1. Here we go. All right, once again, feel free to pause, rewind, whatever you need, but I'm going to do this quickly to save time on the video. 29 degrees is right here. This will be the hypotenuse. This will be the opposite. This will be the adjacent. It looks like I circled hypotenuse and adjacent. Hypotenuse and adjacent is right here. So I'll have cosine as my useful one now. Angle. Yes, I do know the angle. So cosine of 29. The adjacent was labeled as x. And the hypotenuse was labeled as 13. Since x is up high, I will multiply. So 13 cosine 29 is 11.37. And the next one, my angle is here. This is the hypotenuse. This would be adjacent and opposite. My adjacent and opposite are the ones labeled. Opposite and adjacent is tangent. So the opposite, the theta, the angle, is 67. So we do know the angle here. Opposite was 17, adjacent was x. X is up high. Well, no, x is not up high, so we will not multiply, which means we are going to switch them. So it'll be x equals 17 over the tangent of 67. Boop. 17 divided by tangent 67. 7.216. 7.216. There you go. Hopefully you got those. If not, once again, just rewind, rewatch. All right. Next practice. I'm not even going to look at the notes up there. Boom. Same thing. I have my angle. This is my hypotenuse. This is my opposite, and this is my adjacent. Right? Nothing's different. Nothing's different. This is my angle, opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse. SOHCAHTOA. Opposite and hypotenuse. Pause. Which one is it going to be? Sine. Opposite over hypotenuse. So sine of theta equals opposite over hypotenuse. And then theta, do we know theta, the angle? And this time, finally, the answer is no. We do not know the angle, so it's going to have to stay sine of theta. The opposite was 18, and the hypotenuse was 20. So we have 18 over 20 like that, okay? So everything up until this point is exactly the same as the previous. It's just, how do you solve for theta here? And the answer to that is something called an inverse trig, which is denoted up here, we can actually look at now, is with a -1. Sine inverse, it's like a superscript, kind of like an exponent. Sine inverse of stuff, cosine inverse of stuff, tangent inverse of stuff. And it's how you would actually solve for theta here. You do something called a sine inverse of both sides. And it's just a different thing on the calculator that you're going to do. So instead of sine, you would press second sine on this calculator at least. Some other ones just have a different button for sine inverse, but you would do that. And then just 18 divided by 20. And that's just going to spit out the answer for you. The important thing is that when you are solving for an angle, you have to do an inverse. So when you solve for an angle, maybe I'll write that since these are notes. If you are finding an angle, use inverse. Boom. All right. What was that? 64.16. There you go. That's the angle. For number 2 here, there's my angle. This is hypotenuse. This is opposite. This is adjacent. SOHCAHTOA. I have opposite and adjacent. Opposite and adjacent. The opposite was 27. The adjacent was 25. The theta was x. And another time, these are both numbers. We're trying to get this by itself. So you have to get rid of the tangent. And the way you get rid of tangent is with that tangent inverse. Boop, boop. So we'll just do that. Second tangent for my calculator, 27 over 25. 47.2 about. 47.2. Like that. Okay. I recommend trying one of these problems. Try this one. I don't want the video to be too much longer, so I'm just going to do that one. Pause it, try it. This is the angle. This is the hypotenuse. This is the opposite. This is the adjacent. SOHCAHTOA. Adjacent hypotenuse. Adjacent hypotenuse. Theta, the angle is just an x. Adjacent was 74 and the hypotenuse was 80. So I'm going to be doing cosine inverse of both sides to get rid of that cosine. Inverse cosine of 74 over 80. And that is 22.33 about. Okay, hopefully that is helpful. Once again, you set up the equations the same way every single time. It's just how do you solve? If you're solving for an angle, you have to use the inverse. On the other page, sometimes we had to multiply by a number. We multiplied to solve for an x when it was up high. When x is up high, you multiply. When x is down low, then you switch, So if one of the numbers is missing on a sides, then you're going to be multiplying or dividing. But in all of these ones, you had the angle. It's only if you're looking for an angle that you're going to be using the inverse. Okay, so those are the three things that you can do. All right, hopefully this was useful. Everyone have a great day.